My son forgot to hang up the phone. I heard. She has to go to a nursing home. She's too old to live alone. I didn't say anything, but something broke inside me. I sold the country house for $900,000. They came back from vacation happy and excited, but surprise was waiting. Their keys wouldn't open the door. They found a white envelope on the porch, and after reading it, they started screaming. Then I knew they wouldn't give up easy. This was just starting. Before we continue, first let me thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a shout out in our next video. Today's special shout out goes to Cora Walker from Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The phone rang while I was washing dishes from lunch. My homemade soup recipe, though it never tasted right without my late husband's jokes at the table. I saw Michael's name and smiled despite feeling lonely. "Mom, how are you doing today?" His voice sounded warm like when he was little. I sat in my favorite kitchen chair, the wooden one Robert had made 40 years ago. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished lunch and was watching my stories on TV. I didn't mention it was leftover soup from yesterday, or that I'd been staring at Robert's picture for an hour. Are you eating enough? You know I can bring groceries over, right? I showed you the grocery app." "I'm eating plenty," I said softly, though I had a little accident yesterday. I left the iron on and almost burned my blouse. Thank goodness I smelled the smoke from the living room. There was silence. I could picture him making that worried face like his father used to. "Mom, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more often." "Michael, I'm fine really. How was your trip to Florida? You and Sarah at the beach, right?" "Yes, we just got back from Miami. Sarah's been handling the hotel bookings while I sat through boring meetings about vacation packages." She laughed, but it sounded fake. "Listen, Mom, I should probably go. Sarah and I have dinner plans with some important clients." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Mom. Take care of yourself, okay?" I heard a click, then rustling sounds. He must have dropped the phone in his pocket, I thought, reaching to hang up. But then I heard voices, quiet but clear through his phone. "Michael, you see how she's getting worse." Sarah's voice, no longer sweet and caring. "She almost started a fire yesterday. What if she burns the whole place down?" My hand froze on the phone. I spread through my chest. "It's time for a nursing home, Michael." Sarah's voice, cold and mean. "She's becoming a burden, and you know it. Your mom's nice, but she can't live alone anymore. The country house is worth almost $1 million now," Michael said, sounding excited. "With the lake view and all that land, we could probably get $900,000, maybe more." "Exactly," Sarah sounded pleased. "We could sell it, put her somewhere cheap, and finally buy that big house in Denver we've been wanting, the one with the pool." My daughter-in-law actually laughed. "God, Michael, you should have seen her tonight. So grateful just to hear from us. She has no idea we're planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused she'll get. We should act while she still trusts us completely." The phone slipped from my shaking hands, crashing onto the kitchen floor Robert and I had tiled together 30 years ago. Every tile laid with our own hands, every pattern chosen with thoughts of our family's future. I sat in the sudden quiet of my empty house, staring at Robert's photograph on the counter. His eyes seemed to look into mine with an expression I couldn't understand. Sadness, warning, or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who've already left this world. The old grandfather clock in the hallway, Robert's retirement gift to himself 20 years ago, ticked steadily in the growing darkness. Outside, the first summer fireflies began their evening dance in the garden Robert had planted, and I still watered every day. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt hearing my son's voice just moments before. My hands, soft from years of cooking and cleaning, slowly curled into fists. They thought I was a burden. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and thrown away. They were already spending my money, already planning their new life over my grave. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, Robert's face watching me from the wooden frame on the windowsill. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard my son's betrayal and were holding their breath. My legs felt wobbly when I finally stood to turn on the light. The warm glow fell across the kitchen we'd decorated piece by piece, each item chosen with care and saved for with hard work. The yellow curtains where Michael used to hide playing peekaboo. The round table Robert built in the garage, sanding it smooth while Michael played with his toy cars. I walked to the bedroom and opened the drawer where I kept old bills and papers. My fingers found the folder I was looking for without thinking. 25 years of money records I'd never thrown away because Robert always said, "You never know when you might need them." University of Denver bills, $52,000 over 5 years. I remembered those long days, working at the diner with aching feet and tired hands. Robert would have coffee ready and would rub my shoulders while I paid bills at this very kitchen table. "Margaret, you're working yourself to death," he'd said one night, watching me figure out how to pay for Michael's fall classes. "He deserves better than we had, Robert. He's smart enough for anything." Robert had kissed the top of my head. "Just don't give him so much that he forgets to say thank you." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. The wedding bills were in there too. $28,000 for one day. I told Michael we could pay $3,000, maybe $5,000 if we stretched. But Sarah had actually cried about wanting her dream wedding. I'd worked extra shifts at the diner for 8 months, coming home with sore feet and grease in my hair. "Mom, you're the best mother in the world," he'd whispered during our dance, his head on my shoulder, his tuxedo scratchy against my dress. I'll never forget this. But he had forgotten. Just like he'd forgotten who helped him buy his first car when he had no money. Just like he'd forgotten who made calls to get him that travel job when he couldn't find work for 6 months after college. I found the bank papers from 3 years ago after Sarah lost her hotel manager job for reasons they never fully explained. They'd moved in for a while, just until Sarah found something new. I'd never asked for rent money. I'd paid the higher electric bills, bought food for 3 people instead of one lonely old woman. Sarah would hug me and call me the most generous woman in Colorado. Michael would pat my arm and say, "Mom, we'll pay you back when we get steady again." They'd been steady for over 2 years now, both working good jobs, both making more money than Robert and I ever had. But they'd never talked about moving out, never mentioned paying me back. The fancy dinner I'd paid for last month, $180 at that expensive place downtown because Sarah said they deserved to celebrate their anniversary. The car repair I'd covered when Sarah's car needed new brakes, $2,500 that emptied my emergency savings. "Margaret's like a mother to me," Sarah had told her friends at their last party, her arm around my shoulders. "I'm so lucky to have married into this family." I'd been proud, actually proud, to be the generous mother-in-law, the woman who took care of her family no matter what it cost me. I walked upstairs to Robert's and my bedroom, still the same after 3 years. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand. His favorite book still marked where he'd stopped reading. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept our important papers and pulled out our original house deed. Margaret and Robert Wilson, purchased 1995. No loans, no cosigners, no problems. My name only now that Robert was gone. Standing there in the bedroom where Robert had spent his last days, surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt something change inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass. But underneath it, something harder was forming. They wanted to put me away and sell my life's work. They thought I was too old, too confused, too grateful for their attention to fight back. I looked at Robert's photo on the nightstand, remembering his voice from all those years ago. "Don't give him so much that he forgets to say thank you." Well, Robert, our son, had definitely forgotten, but he was about to remember that his old mom wasn't as helpless as he thought. I walked to my little office and pulled out the business card I'd kept in my desk drawer for 5 years. Linda Martinez, real estate lawyer. Robert had insisted we meet with her after his heart attack, just to make sure our papers were in order. It was time for another meeting. The next morning, I walked through my house like a stranger seeing it for the first time. But instead of seeing home, I was seeing what Michael and Sarah saw. Square feet, market value, liquid money. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the tile counter Robert had installed himself, working by flashlight after his regular job, because we couldn't afford to hire workers. I'd picked out the pattern blue and white that caught the morning light. I'd made breakfast on this counter every morning for 25 years until the arthritis made my hands too stiff. I remembered the Christmas morning when 2-year-old Michael took his first steps right here from the stove to Robert's open arms. We'd both cried with joy. Robert scooping our baby up and spinning him around while I grabbed for the camera. "Our baby's walking in our house," Robert had whispered, tears streaming down his face. In the house we built for him. The living room held 30 years of Christmas mornings. I could still see 6-year-old Michael's face lighting up at the sight of the train set Robert had spent 4 months building in the garage, working in secret after Michael had gone to bed. I'd sown tiny trees for the landscape, made miniature buildings from cardboard and paint. "Mom, it's just like a real town," Michael had squealed, and it was. Robert had made it perfect down to the little train station that looked like the one in our own town. That train set had cost us 8 months of overtime. I'd seen it in a catalog and fallen in love with the idea of Michael playing there in the afternoons. Robert had learned to cut what he'd never cut before, measured and remeasured until his back ached from bending over the tiny pieces. "Margaret, we can't afford this," Robert had worried when he saw me marking the train layout on paper. "You want it for him, he'll have it," I told him. "I'll make it work." I climbed the stairs to Michael's old room, still painted the soft blue he'd chosen for his 10th birthday, still decorated with photos of his high school friends and college memories. The room where I'd rocked him through feverish nights as a baby, where Robert and I had helped him with math homework at the small desk Robert had built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Robert's side of the bed still had his water glass on the nightstand, his bookmarks still marking page 156 of the mystery he'd never finish. I'd organized these closets with my own hands, custom arranged to fit Robert's height perfectly. His clothes still hung there, still smelling faintly of his aftershave. This was the room where we'd planned our future, where we'd whispered about our dreams for Michael, where Robert had died holding my hand while machines beeped around us. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," he'd said near the end, his voice barely a whisper. "You're too good, Margaret. Too giving. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." I'd promised, but I hadn't kept that promise, had I? In my home office, I found the folder of building photos Robert had kept, pictures of us laying the foundation in the spring of 1995, 28 years younger and 30 pounds stronger. Me and Robert installing the porch. Robert in his work hat bringing me lemonade on hot summer days. My belly just starting to show with Michael. The money records from those years told the story Robert's photos couldn't. Second mortgage, personal loan from my sister. Robert taking a part-time job at the hardware store to help with materials costs. We'd eaten pasta and beans for months. Drove cars held together with hope and duct tape. But we'd built this house with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love for each other and for the family we were creating. And now my son, the baby who'd taken his first steps in this kitchen, the child who'd played in the yard Robert had landscaped by hand, wanted to sell it all and put me away like an old piece of furniture. I picked up Linda Martinez's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 5 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. Michael and Sarah thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who'd be grateful for any crumb of attention they threw her. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Linda's number and listened to it ring, my hand steady as phone. Outside, the summer morning was bright and clear. The kind of day Robert used to love, the kind of day for new beginnings. The law offices of Martinez and Partners occupied the first floor of a nice brick building on Main Street, the kind of place that helped regular people with real problems rather than impressing big companies. I'd chosen my best dress, the navy blue one Robert had bought me for our anniversary, and arrived 20 minutes early, my hands only slightly shaking as I signed in at the front desk. Linda Martinez was older than I'd expected, maybe 65, with gray hair and the patient smile of a woman who'd heard every family horror story twice. Her office was lined with law books and family photos. Husband, 3 grown children, a small dog, the kind of normal life Robert and I had tried to build. "Mrs. Wilson, good to see you again." Linda poured tea from a small pot in the corner, the sweet smell filling the space between legal documents and filing cabinets. "I remember you and Robert from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." I accepted the tea, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need to discuss something difficult about my son and daughter-in-law." Linda settled behind her desk, pen ready. "I'm listening." I told her everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my house and put me in a nursing home. Linda's face never changed, but I caught her shaking her head slightly when I described their excitement to spend my money on their Denver dream house. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Wilson, this situation is more common than you'd think." Linda set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable property is involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? I mean, legally. Let's start with the basics. The house is titled in your name only since your husband's passing, correct?" "That's right. Robert and I owned it together, but when he died, it transferred to me automatically. Then, legally speaking, your son and daughter-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your clear permission." Linda pulled a legal pad from her drawer and began making notes. "The house belongs to you. Period." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. "So if I wanted to sell it myself, I could?" "You could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision." Linda looked up from her notes. "May I ask why you're considering that option?" I thought about Sarah's laugh when she'd called me a burden, about Michael's cold calculation of my worth, about 30 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. My hands clenched around the teacup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Linda was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "The housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your area. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price." Pause. "If you were serious about selling quickly before your son and daughter-in-law return from their trip, how quickly could it happen?" "With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe. Less." Linda leaned forward. "But Mrs. Wilson, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built this house with my husband, Mrs. Martinez. Every room, every detail, every custom touch. I know exactly what I'm doing." We spent the next hour discussing details. Market value estimates, cash buyer networks, legal requirements. Linda explained that she could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I was serious about moving forward. "The consultation fee is $150, Linda said as I prepared to leave. "If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale." I paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. Walking to my car in the summer sunshine, I felt my phone buzz in my purse. Michael's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since his betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture him in some hotel room in Florida, probably checking his watch, wondering why his grateful old mother wasn't jumping to answer his call. Him wonder. Let him and Sarah make their plans about my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as I climbed into my car, Linda Martinez's business card secure in my wallet, and a plan forming in my mind that would teach my ungrateful son exactly who he was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing, but I knew he'd call back. He always did when he needed something from the old woman. This time he was going to get much more than he bargained for. By the time I reached my driveway, confidence had replaced the shake in my hands. Linda Martinez's words echoed in my mind. It's your property, your decision. 30 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like morning fog in the summer sun. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the window, I could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Michael's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since his betrayal I smiled. Let him worry for a moment. Let him wonder why his grateful old mother wasn't scrambling to answer. I poured myself a glass of water, took a deep breath, and picked up on the 7th ring. "Mom, there you are." Michael's voice practically sparkled with fake enthusiasm. "I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier." "Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands." I kept my tone warm, motherly. "How's Florida treating you?" "Oh, you know how these business trips are. But listen, I have the most wonderful news." He paused for dramatic effect. "Sarah and I have been planning something very special for you." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. "Oh, we want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything you've been through since Dad died." His voice carried that practiced sympathy I now recognized as manipulation. "There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything." A resort with medical staff. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me." "Nonsense, your family." Sarah's voice came through the background. She must have been listening on speakerphone. "We've already made all the arrangements." "When were you thinking?" I managed, knowing full well they wanted me gone before they returned. "To claim their inheritance." "Well, we should be back by next Wednesday," Michael said. "We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and personal items. You know, the essentials." The essentials. Not the photo albums Robert had lovingly arranged. Not the furniture Robert had built with his own hands. Just the essentials for an old woman being shuffled off to die. "Actually, Michael, I have a surprise for you too when you get back." "Oh, Mom, what kind of surprise?" He sounded genuinely pleased, probably. Imagining I'd signed papers or made their job easier somehow. I walked to the window Robert had installed for me, looking out at the garden he'd planted, the bird bath where we'd spent countless evenings watching robins and cardinals. "It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised." "You're so sweet, Mom. We'll talk about everything when we get home, okay? Get some rest and we'll take care of everything else." "Wheat." She called me sweet while planning to steal my life. "I will, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Mom. See you Wednesday." The line went dead, and I set the phone down with hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities I'd never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed, "Real estate agents, Mountain View." The search results filled my screen like ammunition in a war I was finally ready to fight. I'd always been careful. 30 years as a diner manager had taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that careful nature would serve a different purpose. I clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client reviews like I used to compare food suppliers. Lakewood, Golden, Highlands Ranch. Neighborhoods where houses sold for the kind of money Michael and Sarah were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing in the top results. Patricia Chen, 38 years old, specialized in quick sales, averaged 15 days from listing to closing. Her photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of woman who could make things happen fast. Her reviews were exactly what I needed to see. Patricia sold our house in 4 days. Cash buyer lined up within 24 hours. Smooth closing, no problems. I stared at her direct phone number prominently displayed beneath her credentials. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. Once I made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, manageable old woman my son expected. Robert's photo on my desk seemed to be watching me. I could almost hear his voice. "Margaret, are you sure about this?" I was sure, more sure than I'd been about anything since his funeral. I dialed Patricia Chen's number with steady fingers. "Patricia Chen, Mountain View Real Estate. How can I help you?" "Miss Chen, my name is Margaret Wilson. I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast can these things actually happen?" "Well, Mrs. Wilson, that depends on several factors, but with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 8 days with cash buyers." "What kind of timeline are you looking at?" 8 days. My heart hammered against my ribs. 8 days. That fast? Absolutely. The market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods. "Can you tell me a bit about your house?" I looked around my kitchen, seeing it through a buyer's eyes for the first. 2-story, 2,800 square feet, built in 1995, Mountain View area. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. I've maintained it well. Did most of the decorating myself over the years. Patricia's voice sharpened with interest. That sounds exactly like what several of my investors are looking for. Original owner, well-maintained, established neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you be interested in a property assessment? How quickly could you come by? I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 2 o'clock. I glanced at the clock. It was just past 11. 2 o'clock works perfectly. Let me give you the address. After I hung up, I sat in the sudden quiet of my kitchen, the magnitude of what I'd set in motion beginning to settle in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the house Robert and I had built together, assigning dollar values to our memories. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning obsessively. Old habits from Robert's time when he'd insist the house be spotless for any visitor. I dusted the windowsill, straightened the throw pillows on the couch, made sure every surface gleamed. But this cleaning felt different. I wasn't preparing for guests. I was preparing for an execution. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath that carried the scent of Robert's roses, still blooming in the garden, and walked toward the front door. My hand trembled slightly as it closed around the brass doorknob Robert had installed himself 20 years ago. Beyond this door waited either my salvation or my damnation. I turned the handle and opened the door to my future. Patricia Chen looked exactly like her photo, professional but friendly, late 30s, with a kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. She carried a leather briefcase and tablet, and the moment she stepped inside, her eyes went wide. "Wow!" She stopped in my entryway, her gaze traveling up the wood trim Robert had installed by hand to the hardwood floors we'd selected together. "Mrs. Wilson, this is exactly what I was hoping for." I watched her take in the details. The way the afternoon light streamed through my kitchen window, the smooth flow from living room to dining room that Robert had achieved by opening up the wall. Her appreciation was genuine, professional. "You weren't kidding about maintaining this place." She pulled out her tablet and started taking photos. "These hardwood floors throughout, original. Installed them ourselves in 1998. Robert wanted something that would last, so we went with solid oak." I found myself falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing our work, proud despite everything that was happening. "And this kitchen." Patricia stopped at the tile counter, running her hand along the edge. "Custom installation, every inch." I picked the pattern, said the blue reminded me of summer sky. My voice caught slightly. Robert spent 4 weekends getting the measurements perfect. Patricia was typing notes on her tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing faucets and switches with the thoroughness of someone who knew what buyers wanted. Mrs. Wilson, I have to be honest with you. In my 12 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm a diner manager. Was a diner manager. I believe in keeping things clean and organized. It shows. She gestured toward the living room. May I? I nodded, following her as she admired the open floor plan, the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace, the way my decorating choices had turned our building project into a home. This window seat, custom work. Built it for our son. He wanted a place to read his comic books. I could picture him there with his superhero stories and afternoon snacks. His reading glasses too big for his little face. Patricia was taking measurements now. Her excitement barely contained. Mrs. Wilson, I need to show you some comparable sales. She pulled up listings on her tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $780,000 to $850,000. My chest tightened. That was more than Michael and Sarah had estimated in their cruel conversation. But given the condition and custom features of your home, I'm thinking we price it at $900,000. That should move it quickly while getting you top dollar. $900,000. I sat down heavily in Robert's reading chair, the number spinning in my head. That much. I managed. Mrs. Wilson, you're sitting on a gold mine. Properties like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition. Patricia's voice carried the confidence of someone who knew her business. I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property. What kind of investment group? They specialize in high-quality rental properties in established neighborhoods. They pay cash. No financing contingencies. No repair negotiations. They can close in 8 business days. 8 business days. Michael and Sarah would return from Florida in 5 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable mother, ready to be shipped off to their resort. What's the catch? Why so fast? Patricia smiled. No catch. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly, your house is in better shape than most new construction. I see. I looked around the living room where Michael had taken his first steps, where Robert and I had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons, reading the paper together. When would I need to be out? Standard contract gives you 30 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork. I thought about Sarah's voice on the phone calling me sweet while planning to steal my life. I thought about Michael's cold calculation reducing me to a burden to be managed. I thought about Robert's warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. Patricia's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine excitement. Excellent choice, Mrs. Wilson. Let me call them right now. I watched her dial, heard her describe my property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure. Mountain view area, original owner, perfect condition, custom features throughout. She ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sun was setting through my kitchen window, casting golden light across the room where I'd just agreed to sell 30 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. How does 10 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air like smoke, and I realized Patricia was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Robert's retirement gift to himself, ticked steadily in the silence. 10 a.m. sounds perfect. After Patricia left with promises of contracts and closing timelines, I stood alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through my windows painted everything golden, like a photograph of a life I was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was anticipation. Patricia arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone, the kind of professional efficiency I'd always respected. I read every line with a thoroughness that had made me a good manager, checking details the way I used to check inventory lists. Sale price: $900,000. Cash purchase, closing date: 8 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, walked me through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough, and you can remain in the house for 30 days after closing if needed. That's correct, Mrs. Wilson. Though most sellers prefer to move out sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind. Peace of mind. I almost laughed. The only peace of mind I'd have would come from seeing Michael and Sarah's faces when they discovered what their burden had done. I signed my name with steady hands, and just like that, the process was in motion. The first 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began their search through decades of records. The investors sent their team, a polite crew who admired Robert's workmanship and found nothing to complain about. "Your husband really knew what he was doing," one of them told me, since they assumed Robert was still around. "These floors, this electrical work, all top quality." Days 4 through 6. I became a woman with a secret mission. I researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable, somewhere I could start over with nearly $900,000 in the bank. I found a place in Golden, a senior community with walking trails and a library, the kind of place Robert and I had sometimes talked about for our golden years. I also called storage facilities, planning which of Robert's things I'd keep and which I'd have to leave for the new owners. His tools, definitely, his favorite books, the photo albums, the essentials of a life. Lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought a strange confidence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning I woke up knowing I was one step closer to freedom, one step closer to showing my son that his confused old mother was sharper than he'd ever imagined. Mrs. Henderson from across the street noticed the activity, asked about the inspectors and official-looking people. "Just some repairs being done," I told her, hating the half-truth, but knowing the full truth would spread through the neighborhood before I was ready. On day 7, Patricia called with final confirmation. "Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mrs. Wilson. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately." That night I packed a single suitcase with clothes and personal items, not because I was moving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Robert's photo on our dresser and whispered, "I hope you understand what I'm doing." Wednesday. Morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of summer day Robert used to say was Colorado at its finest. I dressed carefully in my best outfit, not the funeral dress, but the yellow one Robert had bought me for our anniversary. The title company office was all professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their lawyer, a sharp man who double-checked every document. Patricia handled the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mrs. Wilson, if you'll sign here and here, initial there." Each signature felt like cutting a chain. The deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1847 Pine Street no longer belonged to Margaret Wilson. "And this is your wire transfer confirmation. $900,000 less closing costs has been deposited to your account." I stared at the numbers on the paper. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. More money than Michael and Sarah had dreamed their burden could access. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Patricia walked me to my car, promising to stay in touch if I ever needed real estate services again. "You made the right choice, Mrs. Wilson. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need." I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for 30 years, past the elementary school where Michael had learned to read, past the park where Robert and I used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt liberation. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car, looking at the house that was no longer mine. The keys to the front door felt heavy in my palm. But tomorrow, I'd hand them over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of my life. Michael and Sarah were due back from Florida in 2 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable mother, ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty house and a lesson they'd never forget. I climbed out of my car and walked toward my front door, reaching for my phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than I'd ever hoped. The engine ticked as it cooled in my driveway, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. I sat staring at the house I'd built with Robert's help. The house that now belonged to strangers. The house where Michael and Sarah expected to return and find their grateful, manageable mother waiting to be shipped OFF. The keys to the front door felt like lead in my palm. New owners or not, I still had access for 30 days. Time enough to complete what I'd started. I drove to the Home Depot on Highway 6 and parked in the lot, hands steady as I dialed directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. The emergency fee would cost an extra $150, but money was no longer a concern. AAA Emergency Locksmith. This is Carlos speaking. I need all my door locks changed today. It's urgent. What kind of time frame are we looking at, ma'am? As soon as possible. I can pay cash. I can be there in 90 minutes. Address. Back at the house, I waited for Carlos in my car, watching Mrs. Henderson tend her flower garden across the street. She waved and I waved back, my chest tight with the knowledge that I was lying to everyone who cared about me. Carlos arrived in a van full of tools and hardware, a man in his 40s who'd clearly seen every kind of lock emergency Colorado had to offer. Security issue, ma'am? He asked, studying my front door. New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry. He nodded like he'd heard it before and got to work. I watched him remove the locks Robert had installed 20 years ago, the brass hardware I'd picked up because it matched our mailbox. These are quality locks, Carlos commented as he worked. Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them. That was my husband. He liked things done right. The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They clicked differently when Carlos tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. Here are your new keys, ma'am. 3 copies of each. Front door, back door, and garage side entrance. Carlos handed me a ring of keys that felt foreign in my palm. That'll be $380 with the emergency fee. I paid in cash from my wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Margaret Wilson to this transaction. After Carlos left, I stood in my empty house and began the hardest part, packing 30 years of life into what I could carry. Robert's favorite books went into my suitcase first, along with our wedding photos and the mystery novel he'd been reading when he died. Bookmarks still marking page 156. My diner management certificates, our important documents. Robert's favorite coffee mug with the handwritten note I'd left in it. I left almost everything else. The furniture that told our story would have to stay. The photo albums chronicling Michael's childhood. Robert's clothes still hanging in our closet, still carrying the faint scent of his FA. While I packed, I called Sunset Gardens Apartments on my phone, explaining that I needed a furnished 1-bedroom immediately. We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy, said Mr. Davis, the property manager. Month-to-month lease if you prefer flexibility. I'll take it. I met Mr. Davis at the apartment complex an hour later. A modest but clean building designed for seniors with a community garden and well-maintained grounds. The 1-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything I needed to start over. Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mrs. Wilson. When would you like to move in? Tonight. Mr. Davis's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't ask questions. I signed the lease and handed over first month's rent plus deposit, nearly $2,800 that would have seemed impossible to spend casually just 2 weeks ago. Loading my car in the gathering dusk, I caught Mrs. Henderson watching from her window. She waved again, and I felt the weight of all the relationships I was severing, all the connections Michael and Sarah had forced me to cut. I took one last walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing differently now that the house belonged to someone else. In the kitchen where Robert had taught Michael to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. In the living room where we'd watched Michael open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom where Robert had taken his last breath while I held his hand. "I'm sorry, honey," I said aloud to Robert's memory. "But you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good." I locked the new locks and drove away from Pine Street for what might be the last time. My rear-view mirror full of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting when I arrived at Sunset Gardens, my car, loaded with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to my new front door, fumbling with unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside the small apartment, I dropped my suitcase and immediately reached for my phone. The final phase of my plan required one more call, one more piece of the puzzle that would give Michael and Sarah the surprise of their lives. The apartment felt like a hotel room, functional but soulless, with generic furniture and the lingering smell of industrial carpet cleaner. Stood holding my phone, Robert's photo already positioned on the nightstand, trying to decide which bank would best protect nearly $900,000 from the children who thought they deserved it. I opened my laptop on the small dining table and began researching banks that specialized in large deposits. First National Bank caught my attention, smaller than the major chains, with a focus on personal service and discretion. Exactly what I needed. First National Bank, Private Banking Division. "This is Jennifer Clark." "Miss Clark, my name is Margaret Wilson. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $900,000. The brief pause on the other end told me Jennifer was recalculating her day. "We'd be absolutely delighted to work with you, Mrs. Wilson. When would be convenient for a consultation?" "Friday morning, 9 a.m. "Perfect. I'll have everything prepared." The weekend stretched ahead of me like uncharted territory. I'd never lived anywhere but the house Robert and I built together. This tiny apartment felt like exile, but it was exile by choice. My choice, not theirs. Saturday morning, I made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchenette and methodically unpacked my belongings. Robert's books on the bookshelf, my diner awards on the wall, our wedding photo beside the bed where I'd sleep alone in a space that had never known Robert's presence. I drove to the grocery store and bought food for one person. Simple meals. Nothing that required the kind of cooking Robert had loved. The checkout clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, asked if I was new to the area. "Just moved in," I told her. "Starting fresh." Sunday morning, I discovered a coffee shop called Mountain Brew, 4 blocks from my apartment. The barista, a young man named Jake with a friendly smile, made the kind of strong coffee I preferred. "You're new around here," he observed, not prying, just friendly. "Retired diner manager," I said, looking for a quieter life. "Well, you found the right neighborhood for that. Most of our customers are pretty mellow." I sat by the window with my coffee, watching people walk dogs and push strollers, living the kind of normal Sunday morning that Robert and I used to treasure. But instead of sadness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. Monday morning, I dressed in my best outfit and drove to First National Bank. Jennifer Clark was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with a kind of professional warmth that came from handling people's life savings. "Mrs. Wilson, what brings you to First National Bank?" "I recently sold my house. I need a fresh start with an institution that values personal relationships over transaction fees." Jennifer nodded with genuine understanding. "We specialize in exactly that kind of service. Tell me about your needs." I explained my situation carefully. A widow who'd sold her family home and needed secure, accessible banking. Jennifer asked thoughtful questions, never prying beyond what was necessary for account setup. "I'll need to wire the funds from my previous bank," I explained. "No problem at all. We can initiate that transfer today, and the funds should clear by Wednesday." Jennifer prepared the paperwork with quiet efficiency. Online banking, debit card and checkbook, all standard services. Given the amount, I'd also recommend our premium account package for additional security features. I signed documents that made me an official client of First National Bank, customer number 592847, with access to nearly $900,000 that Michael and Sarah would never see. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the strange rhythm of my new routine. Morning coffee at Mountain Brew. Jake remembered my order and asked about my weekend. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood, discovering a small park with benches where other retirees fed ducks and read newspapers. Wednesday afternoon, Jennifer called with the news I'd been waiting for. Mrs. Wilson, your funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active. I hung up and looked around my small apartment at Robert's photo, watching me from the nightstand, at the simple life I was building from the wreckage of my son's betrayal. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt truly in control of my own destiny. Wednesday evening, I sat in my single chair. Not Robert's reading chair, not the recliner where I'd heard Michael's betrayal, just a plain chair in a plain room that belonged entirely to me. I opened my laptop and typed "mini surveillance cameras" into the search bar. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, knowing that what I was about to order would capture the final act of my revenge. Michael and Sarah were returning on Friday, expecting to find their grateful old mother ready to be managed. Instead, they were going to discover that their burden had become their biggest problem. The search results filled my screen with dozens of surveillance options, from obvious security cameras to devices disguised as everyday objects. After 40 minutes of research, I found what I needed: a wireless mini camera hidden inside what looked like a phone charger. The specifications were perfect for my organized mind. Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control, motion-activated recording, 10-hour battery life, and crystal-clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to my phone from anywhere with internet access. I ordered it with expedited shipping, paying the extra $35 to guarantee Thursday delivery. The total cost was $129, an amount that would have made me hesitate 2 weeks ago, but barely. Registered now. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial element: the note that would explain everything to Michael and Sarah when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, I found the right tone: dignified but devastating, loving but final. I wrote in my careful manager's handwriting, the penmanship Robert had always admired. Dear Michael and Sarah, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I'm becoming a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my house. The house has been sold for $900,000 cash. The money is safely in my new bank account where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about your own housing situation. Your belongings have been packed and are being stored at Golden Storage Solutions on Main Street. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 35 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, M. Thursday morning, the UPS truck arrived at my apartment with a small box containing my surveillance equipment. I spent an hour in my kitchen testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. Thursday afternoon, I drove to my former house for the last time. I used the garage door opener I'd never given Michael and Sarah, parking inside to avoid questions from neighbors. My hands shook slightly as I approached the front door with my new keys. Inside, the house still smelled like home. Robert's aftershave lingering in the closets, the lemon oil I used on the wooden furniture, the faint residue of 30 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made my chest tight. Michael and Sarah's suitcases by the stairs, their mail scattered on the kitchen counter. Evidence that they'd been treating my house as their personal storage facility while planning my exile. I positioned the camera charger by the front door outlet, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where I planned to hang my note. I tested the motion detection, walking in and out of frame until I was satisfied the system would capture every moment of their return. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room one final time, I touched the mantel where Robert's photo had sat for 25 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Robert and I had filled with love. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered to Robert's memory. "Justice served." I locked the house with my new key, tested the camera feed one more time from my car, and drove back to my apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone ready to alert me the moment Michael and Sarah discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in my apartment, I sat in my chair with my phone in my hand, watching the empty doorway through the camera app. The timestamp showed 7:15 p.m. Thursday evening. Tomorrow, Michael and Sarah would return from their business trip, probably discussing their nursing home plans and already spending my money in their minds. They had no idea their grateful old mother had become their worst nightmare. I woke Friday morning with the anticipation of a woman about to witness justice after years of injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone, the camera feed showing my empty former doorway. 3:45 p.m. They should arrive soon. I'd memorized their travel patterns from years of worried phone calls. Sarah always insisted on leaving Miami by noon to avoid traffic, and Michael drove exactly the speed limit. They'd be pulling into my driveway within the hour. I looked at Robert's photo on my nightstand. "I hope you understand what I'm doing, honey." They left me no choice. 4:30 p.m. My phone buzzed with motion detection. A red sedan, Sarah's car, pulled into the driveway of my former house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the screen. Sarah stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Michael emerged from the passenger side, pulling their suitcases from the trunk. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. I watched them approach the front door, Sarah fishing her keys from her purse while Michael set the luggage down. She inserted her key into the lock I'd had changed just 3 days ago. The key didn't turn. Sarah frowned, examining her key ring. She tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird." Her voice came through my phone speaker. "My key's not working." Michael stepped closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the back door." I watched him disappear around the side of the house while Sarah continued struggling with the front lock. When Michael returned 4 minutes later, his face had darkened with alarm. "Back door's locked too, and the garage remote isn't working." His voice carried the edge of panic I'd hoped to hear. "Sarah, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Mom doesn't even know." "Any LOCK?" Michael studied the front door more carefully, his travel agent's mind recognizing trouble when he saw it. "These are brand new locks. This isn't an accident." Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling 'em." I watched her dial my old landline, the number I'd had disconnected 4 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled with confusion. No answer. "It's not even going to voicemail." "Try her cell phone," Michael suggested. "She doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting her one for emergencies." Her voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. Michael was examining the windows now. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "There, that one's unlocked. I can boost you up." I watched my son climb through the kitchen window I deliberately left unlatched, his business suit catching on the frame. He disappeared inside, and moments later, the front door opened from within. Sarah entered with their suitcases, and both of them stopped dead. When they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level, Sarah's hand trembled as she pulled down the envelope with her name and Michael's written in my careful script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands as she tore open the seal. Her eyes moved across my words, Michael reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces change, confusion to shock to disbelief to horror. She sold the house. Sarah's voice rose to a near. How could she do this to us? Michael snatched the note from her hands, reading it again as if the words might change. That manipulative old witch. She was playing us the whole time. $900,000, Sarah was crying now, her careful makeup streaking down her cheeks. She kept it all. That money was supposed to be our future. Your future, Michael snapped, his mask of devoted son finally slipping. This is your mother-in-law, Sarah. You should have handled this better. My fault. She whirled on him, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. You're the one who said she was becoming a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. Well, she was a burden. Look what she's done to us. Michael gestured wildly around the room that was no longer theirs. We're homeless. Our lease expires next week. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They were fighting in my living room about being homeless, just as they'd planned to make me homeless in their nursing home. Call a lawyer, Sarah said desperately. There has to be something we can do. She can't just sell the house without telling us. With what money? Michael's voice dripped with contempt. In case you forgot, I got laid off 4 months ago, and your hotel salary barely covers our car payments. Then get another job. Where do you think travel companies are lining up to hire agents who got fired for booking scams? I watched my daughter-in-law's face crumble as she realized the full scope of their situation. No house, no inheritance, no savings, and Michael's unemployable status finally revealed. How could she be so cruel? She whispered. The same way you were cruel when you called her a burden and planned to warehouse her. Michael shot back. The old woman was smarter than both of us. Through my phone screen, I watched them collapse into my old furniture. Furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Sarah buried her face in her hands while Michael stared at my note with the expression of a man who'd finally understood he'd been played. I turned off the camera feed. I'd seen enough. Walking to my small kitchen, I opened the bottle of Robert's favorite wine I'd saved from the house. A 2019 Cabernet we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Robert's photo. To you, my love. Justice served. The wine tasted like victory. They'd learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Sarah trying to reach me through some new method. I deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to my window, I looked out at the Colorado skyline painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my son and his wife were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in my former house, they were learning that their burden had become their biggest problem. For the first time in 3 years since Robert's death, I felt completely free. I was no longer anyone's burden. I was my own woman again. With my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching ahead like an open road. Margaret Wilson had left the building, and she was never coming back. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to Granny's Voice, and share your thoughts about this story in the comments. Thank you for watching.